A man of honor, man of his word, the great Andy Staples from On3, who last week was a subject of the show asking Brian Schottenheimer about why he started Faton Bauta, and he did not. Andy, did he give the answer that you thought he was going to give, or what were you hoping for?
That was the answer I thought he was going to give. I was hoping for the actual story, but I didn't realize that was also like right after the owl had been in his house. So I think he had a lot going on. There was a lot on his mind, dredging up 10-year-old stories about Florida and Georgia. And that was a weird year. And that thing just sort of took on a life of its own. But that has been the enduring mystery. So, when I'm sitting on my couch this offseason and I find out that Jerry Jones has gone down the hall and hired Brian Schottenheimer as the head coach, I'm like, oh, somebody's got to ask this. The people need to know.
What was he like? It was just 1 year at Georgia, and that was before Georgia became really Georgia.
Well, so it was Mark Richt's last year, and it's interesting because the parallel to this year is something, because when Penn State fired James Franklin, the only thing I could think of is this is like when Georgia fired Mark Richt, because you had a coach who was winning consistently, winning double-digit games consistently, but it wasn't quite good enough for what they wanted. And I've been saying with Penn State, like, where's their Kirby Smart? Like, are they going to find him? So for Schotty, it was an interesting situation because Mike Bobo had been their offensive coordinator, which Mike Bobo is now currently Georgia's offensive coordinator, but he had gone to be the Colorado State head coach. So Mark Richt needed an offensive coordinator who he could trust. And so he went to Schotty, who'd been in the NFL pretty much the entire time. And obviously Schotty was a walk-on quarterback at Florida, played for Steve Spurrier. So, knew the SEC and knew the college game, but got tossed into a kind of a weird situation because Rick was under pressure. They had Jeremy Pruitt as the defensive coordinator. That had not gone very well. That had been kind of a disaster. And so the Wolves were kind of closing in on Mark Richt. And I think that's probably what happened with the Faton Bauta thing. So for those who don't know, Florida's playing Georgia in 2015, and it's Jim McElwain's first year at Florida. The Florida offense is not very good, but the Florida defense, I think I counted 7 or 8 guys who were drafted in the first or second round on that defense. Wow. So it was whoever you played at quarterback was going to get torn up. And they had a guy named Grayson Lambert who'd been their starting quarterback, who'd struggled against Alabama and Tennessee and Missouri. And so they were just trying to come up with something different. But the funny part was that Faton Bauta had this reputation as, oh, he's the good runner. And they didn't do anything different with their offense. Like, I remember when the word leaked out, because Faton Bauta's high school coach leaked it like Thursday before the game. And it was just spread like wildfire. And so the Florida coach was like, oh, my God, are they going to run the triple option against us? What's this going to look like? And they ran exactly the same offense. If the guy was a good runner, you wouldn't know it because they didn't do anything to accentuate it. Although I did read a story that Mark Weiser did in the Athens Banner-Herald this week, or last week. He talked to Faton Bauta, and Faton Bauta's like, I think it was a little overblown me as a runner. But he ends up throwing 4 picks, and it's just, I remember I ran into Brian Schottenheimer at the Senior Bowl. I don't know if it was the next year or he'd gone back to the NFL. And I said, I'd love to hear some stories about that year at Georgia. And he said essentially the same thing he said to you. He's like, there's a lot of stories, and it would take a long time.
Wow. There you go. Andy Staples here on 105 through the Fan.
Yeah, he seemed like he had plenty.
Yeah,
that he was like, I don't want to think about that 10 years ago. Andy, okay, so your initial thoughts just right out of the gate on the first CFP rankings and how things stand.
Well, I think I'm fine with them at the top. The only thing that's weird is where they have Notre Dame, because they have Notre Dame 10, they have Miami 18, they have the same record. They played Miami 1. Like, that's very strange. They should be closer together. Miami should be ahead of Notre Dame. They played. The games need to matter. And it may be that Miami loses another game, falls out, but if you're going to have the same resume, use the tiebreaker of the head-to-head. And you could, if Notre Dame had a much better best win or something like that, then maybe I could understand. But Notre Dame's best win is USC. Miami's best win is Notre Dame. That is a better best win. They've also got Notre Dame ahead of Texas, which Texas's best wins are better than Notre Dame's best wins. Texas has beaten Oklahoma and Vanderbilt. Now, the difference is if Texas were to win out, they will jump Notre Dame. Like if Texas beats Georgia and then beats Texas A&M, they'll finish like 6th or 5th. But That's the weird part. It seems like they are using some more kind of predictive metrics. And it's funny because I've always said, why don't you just let Vegas pick the field? That's essentially what they're doing because they're using these predictive power rankings similar to what the books use to set the lines. So The reason Notre Dame's probably ahead of those teams, like if you plug those into the power rankings, and I've done it with a few of the different interactive ones, Notre Dame would be favored in all those games. That's why they're doing that.
Do you buy any of the kind of, I don't want to say conspiracy theories, but the idea that they slot teams, say Miami, so far back, that way if they get hot, and they don't make the ACC title game, that this keeps 2 ACC teams out. Do you buy that at all?
No, they don't care about that. They don't even think about that. I've done the mock selection. Like you do the teams kind of 3 at a time. Mm-hmm. You're not even thinking about what conference they're in when you're doing it. You're just looking at the resume versus the other resumes of the teams that are right near them. And so that may be what is going on with the Notre Dame Miami thing. Is clearly they were working in very different groups with those two. So that's why you're probably not even getting a head-to-head comparison, because Miami, they were looking at Miami's losses, which the Louisville loss isn't bad. I mean, Louisville's best win is better than Notre Dame's best win too. Louisville should probably be ahead of Notre Dame, and they have one less loss. But the SMU loss was bad. SMU had just lost to Wake Forest. They've lost 3 games. So that was. I understand where they're coming from, but no, there's no conspiracy theory, and there is actually one way the ACC can get 2 teams in, and it comes back to the Georgia Bulldogs who we were talking about earlier. If Georgia Tech were to win out, because Georgia Tech just lost its first game this past weekend, if they win out but do not make the ACC title game, which is a distinct possibility because of tiebreakers, mm-hmm. It would mean they just beat Georgia at the end of the season, and they're 11-1. They'll get in with that.
Yeah.
And then whoever wins the ACC will get in. But that's the only way that works. And Georgia Tech still has to play Pitt, which has been really good since they changed quarterbacks. And obviously they might lose to Georgia. So I don't think that's going to happen, but that's the way it works.
Andy Staples joining us here on 105 through the Fan. Okay, Andy, so it feels like the last couple of years there's been something that we all assume the CFP is rooting for. Like, please, just Florida State, if you could lose, that'd be great. SMU, if you could lose, that would be great. Just, go ahead and make this easy for us so we don't have to make a controversial decision. What do you think they're rooting for right now as they look ahead?
I don't think they care. Everybody thinks they care about that. They do not care. It doesn't matter. You look at the bracket that you use this week's rankings, that it produces a bracket, those games would be awesome. That Notre Dame BYU first round game in Provo would be spectacular. So I don't think that I think people ascribe a lot of feelings to the CFP committee that they don't feel. They just don't care.
When you look at the Texas Tech rise that we've seen, and you'll see on social media sometimes, I don't know how common this narrative totally is other than just with Tech fans, they feel like it, which is just, everybody's trying to claim that we're ruining college football with our Cody Campbell spending and trying to basically take advantage of some of this, which has been a Red Raider, I think, sort of thing. But how impressed have you been just in general with Joey McGuire and Tech and what they've built and the way that they're trying to take advantage of some of the opportunities in NIL?
It's very impressive, and it's not ruining college football. The team with the most money has always won in college football. All they're doing is taking part.
Right.
So, and people say, well, we don't have our own billionaire. That's your own fault. Create your own billionaire. Have an offensive lineman who becomes a billionaire. If they can do it, why can't you do it? So, it's funny because money isn't always the thing that does it, because you see Ohio State doesn't win every year. Georgia doesn't win every year. Alabama doesn't win every year. Michigan doesn't win every year. You can have the most money and still lose. You can have the most money. You can pay the most for a roster and still not put it all together. They've put it together very well. I mean, that defense is absolutely filthy. It may be the best defense in college football behind Ohio State. And they've done a great job of going out and finding players that work for what they want to do. And that's the thing. We've seen it before where at Texas A&M in 2022 when they had the #1 recruiting class. That class didn't do anything. It didn't fill all their needs. It was just collected in a way to have the highest possible ranking. But it didn't fit the scheme. It didn't fit the what they wanted to do. It had a weird positional balance. Like, what Texas Tech did was go find guys that they needed in spots where they needed them and plug them in next to guys that they've brought along themselves. I mean, we talked to Joey McGuire about it. They've got guys that they've had coming out of high school that they were their first offer, and they, unearthed them essentially. Mm-hmm. So it's not just they went and bought a roster. Buying a roster helps, though, a lot. Having a billionaire helps a lot.
Andy Staples on 3 here, joining us on 105.3 The Fan. Do you think they got it right at the top with A&M at 3rd and Indiana, Ohio State ahead of them?
I don't care. They'll play. I mean, it's a tournament. Yeah. Like, that's the part. It does not matter. Like, because you learned last year when Oregon had the best season everybody had. Well, they ended up with the worst matchup in the second round because they had to play Ohio State. The problem is with so few teams and so few data points, you could be the number 1 seed, and if you get the wrong 8 seed, you're screwed. If you're the number 2 seed and you get the wrong 7 seed, you're screwed. So we don't know who's going to be the one. Like, we don't know if you're going to want to be the 1, the 2, or the 3 at the end. So I don't think it really matters. I mean, they're all really good. You could put them in any order, and I wouldn't care. And that's probably what's going to happen. And what'll be more interesting is if they win out, if everybody wins out, Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, where do they put them at the end of it? I think the winner of the Big Ten championship game would be number 1. If A&M's 13-0, they'd be number 2. And then whoever loses the Big Ten championship game would be number 3. But I don't think that's – I think probably the Big Ten teams will win out unless somehow Ohio State finds a way to lose to Michigan again. Texas A&M is a little bit tougher road. Like, they go to Missouri this week. That is a losable game. Missouri needs to win that game a lot more than Texas A&M does. Obviously, the Texas game is going to be tough. But I do like Texas A&M a lot. I love what Mike Elko has done. I remember we were talking to him in May in Destin at the SEC spring meetings, and he said, we are better at every position group. And I remember thinking, wow, because they were pretty good at most of their position groups last year. If he's telling the truth here, this team's going to be really good. But I think the biggest thing they did is adding Mario Craver and Casey Concepcion through the portal. It really changed their passing game because they've got these guys. One, they can get open deep, but also you can hit them in space with a short, kind of high confidence pass, and they can turn it into something. And it's really unlocked what Marcel Reed can be because, you watch Marcel Reed last year and you thought, okay, he's a pretty good runner, but I don't know about Marcel Reed as a passer. Clearly, Colin Klein, their OC, saw what he can be as a passer and built this offense around what makes him good as a passer. So I love what they've done.
Andy, has Arch Manning come out the other side, or are we feeling comfortable about where he's at right now, or are we still a little hesitant? I
feel comfortable about him. I still think their offensive line needs to get better. And, that's one of those things that it's hard to do in season. And Sarkisian has said this essentially without actually saying it, is they messed up the evaluation on their offensive line this offseason. Because Texas has always been one of those, since the portal era started, Texas will go get what they need. They'll spend top dollar on what they need in the portal. And my mistake in evaluating them this offseason was I looked at it and said, oh, they didn't go get any offensive linemen in the portal, which means they know the guys they have coming up are going to be really good. And look, Kyle Flood's been a really good offensive line coach through the years. You trust that judgment. But when you saw him play on the field, you realize, oh, they messed up. They should have gone and gotten some offensive linemen. Like, Oregon went and got a couple starting offensive tackles in the portal. Ohio State got one. They got a couple in the portal. One doesn't start, but one does. And that's what you've got to do in this era. You have to consistently be evaluating your roster, and you have to be pretty harsh about it. You have to be almost like an NFL team where if you think this guy's not going to make it, or you've got a guy that you think is it's more in the NFL, you have guys fall off. In college, they're all young, so they're not falling off. But if you don't think this younger guy that you've been developing is ever going to get where you need him to be, you got to go get somebody who is. And so that's been the problem. Is Arch, I think, has been okay. The UTEP game was rough, but you look at some of these other games, he was just, like with the Florida game, people are just in his face every play. And that's not on him. I thought you look at the Texas game, first half of that Texas game, the Oklahoma game, Oklahoma's defensive line is getting after him. He is escaping. he is turning negative plays into either neutral plays or positive plays. And I think he's grown as a quarterback as the years go on. But a lot of what happened in the early season, I think, was him trying to overcome an offensive line that isn't nearly as good as the one they had last year. And now he's kind of figured out, and Sark's kind of figured out from a play calling perspective, how to make all this work.
Andy, we appreciate it, man. I've been wanting to talk to you for years. I've followed you for a while, so I really appreciate you popping on with us.
Well, you got my number anytime you need me.
All right. Don't say that. We will take you up on that. So thank you, man.
I have a show too, so don't worry. It will be revisited upon you in kind.
Hey, I'm in. Let's do it. All right, Andy. Thank you so much, man. Andy Staples from On3 joining us here on 105.3 The Phantom.